Here we go. Here we go. Okay, so how is it that I get nervous every time this thing start counting down from 10? I'm like, yeah, like I'm ready, but then I'm really not, but then I am, but I'm not really, and I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Even People Show. Thank you for joining the show today. I am your host. At whatever point you join, I'm thanking you from joining now. Yeah. So when you go back and rewatch it later, you'll know what time it is. All right. Today I have a special show for you. It's called The Magic of Poetry. And we're gonna mix it up like I don't think we've ever mixed it up before. It's gonna be mixed. All right. But as usual, I appreciate everybody for being with me here tonight. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to be here on the Evening People Show, and I appreciate that. Be right back. All right, peoples. Welcome back to the Even People Show. Thank you for tuning in with me today. Like I was mentioning before, I have a special show for you tonight. I have four guests with me tonight. Only I have them virtually. They're not physically here. One of the guests I have on tonight reached out to me earlier, and he was like, "The show is today." I'm like, "Bro, it's okay. Calm down. You're virtually on the show today. You're not physically on the show today. There's nothing to worry about." So, the magic of poetry is something I want to talk to you about today as it relates to just how poetry does different things for different people, just how poetry means different things to different people, how different individuals can read the same poem, but somehow they walk away with very different interpretations, very different meanings. In fact, the same person can read the same poem a second time, a third time, a month from now, and they deduce an entirely different meaning that they did not see when they read it the first time. That, to me, ladies and gentlemen, is the magic of poetry. And we're going to explore that today, talking about a poem called Transition. Now, Transition is one of the poems from my book called Love Life Confrontation Expressions, Selections from the Chronicles of a Black Man. Usually I have it behind me. I'm in my second satellite location today, so it's not behind me. Um, but it's a book of poetry, and Transition is one of the poems that has been done most often on this show. Now, I think we've had several poems that have been done probably twice. Transition, for some reason, is a poem that was done not once, not twice, not three times, but transition was done four times. Now, the first time transition was done, it was done by Amina Mosley Gordon, who is first and foremost a Christian, wife, a mother. She's the assistant principal of a school there in New York, and she's a doctoral candidate. I need to get her back on when that doctorate gets finished so we can talk about that. Um, the very next show following her show, we had Norman Grant Jr. on there. Now, Norman Grant is an executive, has been an executive chef. He's the director of dining services at LMU in Tennessee. And he's a man with a passion for flavor and a flavor for passion. Now, if you missed any of those shows, go back and check them out. Now, when I thought Transition had done whatever it was going to do, I had another guest on the show that chose Transition, and that was Patrice Moore. She came to us by way of the Bahamas. She's a veteran educator. She's taught in three different countries now. youth leader, mother, singer, songwriter, recording artist. She has a voice that could just knock you off your seat, right? But she came, and she really represented the same poem, Transition. And like I said, when I thought Transition had lived its last day, I had another guest on that chose to read Transition, and that was my good friend Calvin Harris, who is the principal of Mary Marley Mount Primary. He's also a pastor. He's a veteran educator. He's a guidance counselor. He's a community leader for several different things. He's a president of the Neighborhood Watch. And I think the first question I asked him on the show is, dude, where on earth do you get time to do all the things that you do? That's like 57 different hats. You don't even have enough head to put them on. But anyways, the poem they all chose to do was Transition. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at the magic of poetry. We're going to look at it from the standpoint of this poem here, Transition. We're going to have those folks back on virtually. One of them said they might check in. If I see him pop up on the link, I'll add him. But we're going to have them on here and we're going to talk about the poem Transition, and we're going to see how far we get with that. Okay, so like I mentioned before, the first person that did Transition, and this was back in November of 2020, was Amina Mosley Gordon. She was tuning in from New York, and we're going to check out what Miss Gordon had to say when she read the poem. Check it out.
To it because that is our vehicle. That is a vehicle that we're using to empower. So, without going any further, what are you going to read for us today?
Okay, let me do the teacher mode from my book. Love Life Confrontation Expression, Selections from the Chronicles of a Black Man. So listen, there are some poems that were deep, that were steep, that I'm like, let me leave that one alone. But one really hit me was Transition. That's on page 61, yes.
Transition on page 61. If you have your book out there, flip to page 61. Mrs. Mosley is going to read Transition for us. Whenever you...
So I'm going to pause Miss Mosley here for a second. I think what we should do first is we should have a game of who read it best. So I think that's what we should do. Like they have for those celebrities who wore it best. We're going to have a who read it best is up first, ladies and gentlemen. And contestant number one is Amina Mosley Gordon. Here we go.
All right, Transition. Frustration expressed with a pen, the accents of peace, the accents of zen. Insecurity in one state of mind, questioning the motives of the other side. The sadness that persists, accents of laughter, accents of bliss. The silence that permeates, nothing said in this dormant state. The ever-fleeting clarity, confused by my own reality. Saturated as with showers, one more inch, and the flood devours. Retreating to calculate the sum, forcing the disturbance of my equilibrium, taking note of the areas of change, appraising that which remains, pondering each and every word, what said versus what heard, reducing the unspoken need, not of the giver, but of the one who receives, anticipating the resurgence to come, reanimating where it all began, changing the tactics to meet the goal, maintaining peace within one's soul. This is a 6-year-old poem, dude. We ain't got some hindsight or something.
Yeah, poetry is timeless.
Yeah, that's so true. That's like so true.
You hear that.
And that was Amina Mosley Gordon, who is checked in for the show right now from NY. Bless up yourself, Miss Gordon. So she was on the show, like I said, back in November of 2020. And the very next show, we had Mr. Norman Grant. So let's check out Mr. Grant.
Sure, sir. So, frustration expressed with a pen. The absence of peace, the absence of zen. Insecurity in one's state of mind. Questioning the motives of the other side. The sadness that persists. Absence of laughter, absence of bliss. The silence that permeates. Nothing said in this dormant state. The ever fleeting clarity, confused by our own reality, saturated as with showers, one more inch and the floor devours. Retreating to calculate the sum, sourcing the disturbance of my equilibrium, taking note of the areas of change, apprising that which remains, pondering each and every word, what's said versus what's heard, deducing the unspoken need, not of the giver, but of the one who receives, anticipating this resurgence to come, reanimating where it all began, changing the tactics to meet the goal, maintaining peace within one's soul.
Amen to that, brother. Amen.
Maintaining. It's kind of trippy seeing myself like twice on there. Isn't that kind of trippy? And I look the same way. Look at me. It's the same way. It's kind of trippy. But that was Norman Grant. Like we said, Norman is the director of dining services. And what we're gonna get into here in a little bit is just how differently these individuals saw the same poem, just the different directions that they each took the poem in. Now, about 3 or so months later, Patrice Moore joined us from the Bahamas, and she chose to read Transition as well. And we're going to check out Miss Patrice Moore. Patrice, check
We
in.
get some poetry and poetry analysis in before it's all said and done. If you are just joining, my guest tonight is Patrice Moore. She's joining from the Bahamas, singer, songwriter, musician, mother, teacher, all kind of things. We read a poem from my book, though, called Love, Life, and Condition Expressions, Selections from the Chronicles of a Black Man. And Miss Patrice, what are you going to read for us today?
Transition on
Transition.
page
Transition.
61.
Transition on page 61. Whenever you're ready, ma'am, over to you.
All right. Frustration expressed with a pen. The absence of peace, the absence of zen. Insecurity in one's state of mind, questioning the motives of the other side. The sadness that persists, absence of laughter, absence of bliss. The silence that permeates, nothing said in this dormant state. The ever fleeting clarity, confused by our own reality, saturated as with showers, one more inch,
And the
and the
flood
flood
devours.
devoured. Reacting to calculate the sum, sourcing the disturbance of my equilibrium, taking note of the areas of change, appraising that which remains, pondering each and every word, what's said versus what's heard, deducing the unspoken need, not of the giver, but of the one who receives, anticipating the resurgence to come, reanimating where it all began, changing the tactics to meet the goal, maintaining peace within one's soul.
Ay, ay, ay. Praise the Lord.
And that was Patrice Moore, who had checked in for the Bahamas reading Transition. Now, so a few of the things that came out that were different from especially the first two ladies, once they came out, or similarities and differences, was that of turmoil. I remember Miss Gordon, and I'll never mess her name up again. I called her Miss Mosley the entire show. Miss Gordon was talking about turmoil, instability in the first two lines, the first two stanzas of the poem, as if the honeymoon phase of a relationship was over, and now they had to like reevaluate where they were. There was also mention of one of the two people being referenced having some emotional immaturity as it relates to why they actually ended up in the place that they got to. But before we get any further into it, we can't go without hearing from the pastor, the pope, the principal himself.
All right. All right. Going good so far, Sir Harris. Going good so far. Now, the second part of the show for the first time viewers, we usually read some poetry. The poetry typically comes from my book, back there, Love Life Confrontation Expressions. So, Sir Harris, what are you going to be reading for the folks today?
Right, so the poem we'll be reading is Transition.
Transition.
Yeah, transition.
Transition is a lovely poem. Whenever you're ready, sir, take it away.
All right. Frustration expressed with the pen, the absence of peace, the absence of death. Insecurity in one's state of mind, question the motives of the other side. The sadness that pursues, absence of laughter, absence of bliss. The silence that permeates, nothing said to its dormant state. The ever-sleeping clarity, confused by our own reality, saturated us with a shower. One more thing, and the flood devour us. Retreating to calculate the sum, forcing the servants of my equilibrium, taking note of the areas of change, appraising that which remains, pondering each and every word, what's said versus what's heard, deducing the unspoken needs, not of the giver, but of the one who receives. Anticipating the surgeons to come, reanimating where before began, changing the tactics to meet the goal, maintaining peace within one's soul.
Maintaining the peace within one's soul. Now, Sir Harris, very well read, sir. Very well read. Thank you. Sir.
All right, and that was Sir Harris. Now, the reading of the poem, I hope you guys are hearing that clearly, by the way. The reading of the poem was different from everyone. I think if it was a race, Amina Gordon would have won the race. She was the first. I think she read it like a minute 30 seconds, and then from there, each person kind of took their own time to get it done. But the poem is transition. Now, once we got into what we got into next with the viewer, with the readers, or with the guests was, why did he choose this poem? Why this poem? Why not any other poems that we have in the book? And as the program went on, we kind of got deeper and deeper
This one
into all the things that they saw differently, into all the things that they were eye to eye on. So we're gonna jump right into why you chose the poem. First person we're gonna check into is Miss Amina Mosley. All great. So Amina read it best. Amina read it fast, Miss Mudimu. Madima, Amina read it. You see y'all two with your names. Amina read it fastest. I don't know. I don't know. The jury's out. Let's get some more votes in as to who read it best category of the show. But we're gonna jump into the why did each one of these guests on the show choose this poem versus all the other poems in the show, in the book. Let's see what we get to.
It has some intense aspects to it. Why did you choose this poem?
Well, I'm naturally an introvert person. Thanks to V. Michael. When I say that to some people who know me post Michael,
Right.
they cannot believe that I was an introvert person. I still like my corner. I still like to be in a smaller crowd.
I don't nobody believes me. I'm shy either. Nobody believes
Yeah,
me.
but Michael, just try that. We can't train that anymore because Michael had a system that you didn't have a choice. So for me, having difficult conversations, even up to recent, even in this role, you need to have difficult conversations with people from all walks of life, race, and sometimes it's hard. But I'm coming from a place where I used to just sit down and probably cry it out or not say anything and not really try to understand what's happening. So when I saw this transition, it's like it embodies my own journey from being this quiet, shy person. And probably people who know me from before can attest to that. To being a little bit more outspoken, a little bit more, unafraid. I'm not going to, allow certain energy to destroy who I am or to disrupt, where I am.
Now,
Okay. And that's why she chose it. She was talking about just personal transition, transitioning from being an introvert to becoming an extrovert, transition from being somebody who would be the one to be, in the background to somebody who, whether by choice or by necessity, had to become the person in the foreground. So transition for her, and why she chose this was because for her it represented transition that she experienced in her own life, in her own career. All right, let's see what I think Mr. Grant was up next.
Brother, you mentioned that. Now, I usually wait until like question three or four in the show to ask why someone chose a particular poem. But I'm going to ask you that question right out the gate. Why did you choose this poem?
See, for me, and I know that this poem is about the internal struggles of a person in a relationship state. But for me, my life has always been on a transitionary journey,
Right?
transitioning from masculinity to where they say, well, it could be male, but it's not really male, but then it
Because
feels
it was home economics. Because it was home economics, right?
yeah, because the home economic. Then transition as a teacher, then moving from teacher to a chef life, transitioning from Jamaica to the US, transitioning from Tennessee to Iowa, then from Iowa back to Tennessee, right? Transitioning from actually hands-on being the chef to know instructing the chef. My life has just always been on a transition. And so for me, it takes in all those moments. You spoke about in the fourth stanza where you're talking about just calculating, almost like taking stock of where you are and where you're going to go next. Where do you find that middle ground? Where's your equilibrium? Where's the stability? Where's that zen going to come in? So
Now,
for me, it just speaks to a lot part of my life.
I'm sorry, Norman. Go ahead.
No, it just speaks of I just think that my life is just on a continuous journey, and it speaks to just moving from transitioning from one point to the next.
Sounds good to me. Sounds good to me. I mean,
All right. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, Mosey Gordon was checking in that show, and here she is checking in this show, all over the place, all over the place. Kleshi Hello has checked in. Vimbai Mudimu has checked in. Thank you guys for joining the show. And for all you guys viewing that haven't checked in, bless upon yourself, same way. Now, we are looking at the poem transition. Amelia looked at it. She was looking at it from a different viewpoint than Norman was looking at. Norman was looking at it more from a career. She was looking at it from a introvert becoming an extrovert, somebody that is transitioning their own personality from one step to the next. Norman came in and he looked at it and he was saying that, hey, for me, this transition is more the transition through the stages of my life. At one point, I'm a guy that loved cooking. In order to pursue my career, I had to do home economics. I was the only guy doing home economics. These are all the things that came out in the show. I was the only guy doing home economics in my entire high school. I mean, when I went to college, I was probably one of two or three people doing home economics. So, people tend to look at me as different ways. So I'm transitioning from now questioning myself, questioning what I'm capable of, into going into what I was called to do and what I naturally do. And it doesn't make me any less than, doesn't make me any less of a man, doesn't make me less of anything. And transitioning in my career, transitioning from Jamaica to Iowa, from Iowa to Tennessee, from Tennessee back to Iowa, or if I said that the wrong way around. But it is, for him, it was more going through the stages of a life type of a transition, versus Amina was looking at it from a personality standpoint, coming in, coming out. So we're talking about tonight the magic of poetry, what poetry means to different people when they read it and how they interpret it. Next up, I believe we had Miss Patrice Moore from the Bahamas, and let's hear what she had to say.
listen. See that in a sense, I'm kind of get much here. Let's jump into why you chose this poem. The poem is transition. Why did you choose transition? I thought you were going to read Forbidden Connection. I actually had the clip queued up. I thought you were going to read from the collection from that clip you had sent me a while back. So you chose transition.
No.
Why did you choose transition?
I chose transition because it's totally relatable. Like, I have been there, I have done that, and I've made a mess of myself on too many occasions doing that. And I thought it was something that it's worth having a serious discussion to bring some things to the fore so that persons could learn from it. Like, we tend to go into relationships for the wrong reasons. And even though it's a poem, the message is quite poignant, the message is quite serious. And I just felt that this is a poem to do so that we could have this discussion to bring these things to the fore.
All right. There's a certain amount of restraint or composure that seems to be exercised throughout the poem. They're obviously at an impasse. They're obviously having a conflict, but there's still.
So let me pause here. That was Patrice's why. That was why she chose the poem, because she could identify with the poem. She could identify with the fact that, you know what, this kind of stuff right here happened to people in real life. You know what I mean? People actually are in these situations. This is a part of real life. This has happened to me. This is what I want to read, just so that we can actually have the opportunity to have a conversation about something that I think we should be having a conversation about. All right. And then she goes on to say something else that I'm going to allow to play on here.
The composure that is seen, and it comes up through the poem. How do you see it coming up in the poem, and why do you think this is important in a relationship that is at this particular stage that these people seem to be at? Do you agree that there is composure?
Yes, I saw a number of areas where they were exercising some amount of restraint. And I saw that even with the very first line that says frustration expressed with a pen.
Mhm.
This is somebody trying to restrain their emotions or trying to restrain themselves from overreacting. Um, I saw it also in the third line. I actually wrote them down for you. Different areas in which I saw, and I myself was, taken aback by how mature this person is in restraining himself. Because the thing about a relationship is if you're hot blooded and hot tempered like me, or like I used to be, when you get to these moments when things aren't cloud nine anymore, you would just say, you know what? To hell with all of this. I out of here.
Mhm.
But here's a person who took the time to really do some metacognition, a word we really teach guys to do, to think about thinking about their situation. And I saw it also in verse 1 in the third line that says insecurity in one's state of mind. He wasn't absolutely sure how he felt, or he wasn't absolutely sure as to how he wanted to feel, or how the other person was making him feel. He was thinking about all of these things. So he wasn't just the person who just will jump up and react. Here's a thinker that is weighing the pros and the cons. And he kept using this kind of constraint throughout the poem in verse.
And that's what I think I was getting at with that particular point, is that yes, we are transitioning. Both Amina and Patrice were saying that the state of the relationship that is depicted here is one that is in turmoil. It is one that is at a point of instability. The relationship is at a point where the honeymoon phase is over. There's some emotional immaturity stepping in. Both people are at an impasse. They're at a high emotional state of their relationship. But then she said there's something that still spoke about calm. There's something that still spoke about composure. And too often we see where Jason Bell, bless up yourself, my brother. Too often we see where people respond inappropriately to their significant others when their relationship get to a point where they're no longer seeing eye to eye. Sometimes violence is the response. Sometimes aggressive violence is the response. Sometimes people lose their lives. So I allowed that to run for Patrice, just to bring us to the point where, hey, there is an option to be composed. Yes, your relationship is not where it wants to be. Yes, something happened to you that you felt like should not have happened. Yes, you felt like the other person did you dirty or did you wrong or whatever the case is. They're not understanding. They're not being rational. They're not being reasonable. And you feel like within yourself, you have a right to respond rashly. What Patrice was saying here is don't respond rashly. Take a minute, take a moment, and compose yourself. Think about what you have to say. And if necessary, write it down on paper so the feelings get to come out some other way rather than in a harsh, rash way. All right. Now, before we move on, we have to hear from my good friend Calvin Harris. Let's see what he says.
Insurgents to come, reanimating where it all began, changing the tactics to meet the goal, maintaining peace within one soul.
Maintaining the peace within one soul. Now, Sir Harris, very well read, sir. Very well read. Thank you so kindly.
I want to read.
You see, I can appreciate that. Now, here's the thing. This book has over 50 or about 60 original pieces of poem in it. You chose transition. What was it about transition that made this be the poem you decided to read today?
I think the word, the point, the title of the poem itself grabs my attention.
Mhm.
Thinking about a change, and I'm thinking about my life on the whole, moving from one thing to the other. Life is always about transitioning from one thing to another. And so when I read the poem, I particularly in the last couple of years, the last year, since March, March of last year, with COVID entering and so on, there are a lot of changes, a lot of frustration, a lot of things that are happening. But it is a time for change, transitioning from what it was to a new norm. And so it kind of talk about that way.
Mhm.
And
Now, are there any lines or concepts that are dealt with in the poem that speaks to you specifically? And if so,
Now, before Mr. Harris answers that one, I want us to stick a pin here real quickly. Each person that has been on there has taken the why into another direction. For Amina, it was the most personal. It was me being an introvert, me no longer being an introvert, me coming out of my shell and realizing that I'm every woman and it's all in me and all these things. For Norman, it was career. It was changing places, physical places, career changes, life changes, evolution from a personal standpoint still. For Patrice, it was also personal. It was like, hey, this has happened to me. This has happened to me. I can identify with this. This is my story. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation because I know I'm not the only one out there that has experienced this. The pastor, however, took it into a whole nother level. The pastor was like, no, we're talking about transition in society. We're talking about transition in way of life. We're talking about transition on a global scale where everybody is having to adjust. He made reference to COVID and the changes that was having in our world and in our lives today. And then he goes on to say this.
what lines and what is it for you?
uh, I like the last part of it, the last four lines, for instance, anticipating the resurgence to come, reanimating where it all began, and the two last lines, changing the tactics to meet the goal. That part I like, maintaining peace within one's soul. And I use that not just professionally, but personally, because I did share earlier, and of what I think would have happened personally and created in my life. When I think about it, you have to re-emerge. You have to change your tactics to make sure that the goal of making sure that the family is first is how is it? You never had a plan before. But now that COVID has come and there's online learning, because initially we thought of wanting additional classrooms in the classrooms, all our children to here, because it still operates on the chip system. But even when we heard of the classroom, about 10 classrooms, we don't need any more. But in our head, all we needed was additional classroom and everything.
A bigger physical space.
Physical space.
Right.
Physical space. Now that COVID has come and there's online learning, you have to broaden the picture.
You need a bigger virtual space.
But how will you maximize the online space? And for me, I also think about, do we want to reach a point that we go back to the physical space only? I said, no. We ought to reach a point where I'm going to integrate the physical space with online learning. So online learning will never go much. And the person will have to make sure that they're part of the system where online learning along with face-to-face will be working.
All right, that should be it for my friend. But like we're saying, each of the individual convert, big up yourself. There's somebody that checked in name Fun Time with Alex. I hope I know you. Fun Time with Alex. That sounds fun. Um, Bread, bless up yourself. Tanasha, bless up yourself. Shredded Higgins, Jason Bell for checking in. Bless up yourselves. Now, um, like I was mentioning, Calvin took it to a whole nother spectrum. He like literally blew it out of the atmosphere, because he was not only talking about transitioning in in person. He took it out of the stratosphere. He took it on a global level. He took it on, hey, this is where life is now. This is where our reality is now. It is time for all of us to look at where we are, evaluate where we are, and decide whether or not a change or a transition is necessary, as opposed to the previous views that we had heard, from our previous guests, that more were tied to the individual and the individual development and the individual changing in career and in personality and in who and what they needed to do and be for change. Now, like I mentioned, both ladies and the gentleman mentioned some amount of turmoil in the poem. It talks about, two people at an impasse, two people at a place where they're trying to decide, what should we do next? What is our next move? Do we stay or do we go? Do we get to building a fix, or should we pack up and run? Now, one of the questions that I had asked was about hope for the future, and whether or not they felt like there was hope for the future for the two individuals, or for the people, for the characters of this poem. So we're going to hear from Amina Mosey Gordon, and I think Patrice Moore was one of the individuals.
Now, there is some indication of hope for the future in this poem. What indication of hope is there, and what application does this have for relationships in general?
So, looking at the last verse, you can see that the person went through like a few stages, right? Like hurt, like denial, I'm not sure what this is, and then start processing and then start realizing that, and this shows some sign that the person is probably on the right track.
Right.
So going through these stages and seeing that hope, like anticipating the research and changing the tactics to meet the goal. So this person is reflective, right? And accepting, and from acceptance, then you get the hope. Now, this is my thing. Change is good in a relationship, because without change and discomfort, you can't have any growth, right? But you also have to be aware. You have to have like your change compass up as an individual, because sometimes change can go in the right direction, or change can be counterproductive. It goes in a different direction.
Right.
Because some people change on you and it's not for the better. So even in a relationship, right? You have to know, are you at the point where you have to take the space and the place where you are, if you are willing to take that, if you're willing to go on that journey with the person. Some people, you see them go through some experiences with people, and they help the person, but some of us, we can't handle that. You know what I'm saying? So
you have to realize, you have to be able to identify when something is broke, And
Oh yeah.
you fixing, you need to fix it. And if it changes, you need to change it. But you have to be able to identify when fixing it is not an option, when replacing
Yeah.
is the only option, is what I think. Now, the poem is
Yo, only you the man say. The man say you need to be able to identify when fixing is an option, and you need to be able to identify when the thing broke, when it broke, when it can't glue back, when it can't paste back, when it can't fix back. When it is broken, it is time for you to transition. When you can assess that is salvageable, by all means, salvage it. But you have to, like Miss Gordon was saying, you have to look at it you have to look at it objectively. You can't look at it from a standpoint of I have to fix it. I have to fix it. No, you don't have to fix it. You need to look at it from a standpoint as, is it fixable? And then if it is fixable, by all means fix it. But you have to be objective enough to realize that, hey, if it is not fixable, it is irreparably broken, then it is time to actually move on. Let's see what Miss Moore had to say about hope for the future.
and you've spoken to all those things. All you ladies are absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, based on all this though, what indication do we have for any hope for the future? What would you say this tells us of the where do we see this going? If we had to use whatever context clues we gathered from reading the lines, reading between the lines, reading through the lines, where do you think these two are headed?
When I just started out, especially stanza two, that spoke of the absence of laugh, and
Sir.
then when it jumped down to three and it says the ever fleeting clarity confused by our own reality, and then it said one more inch and the flood the voice. I say, oh Lord, they go
You're
bridge
done.
right now.
You're done. You're done.
They done. They ain't gonna bother with nothing more. They finish. Cause one little thing you could say wrong and everything gone. But when I read a little further and I saw the last line of stanza four that says, appraising that which remains, that changed everything for me. Here's someone who's still in the midst of all of this inner turmoil and conflict was able to say, you know what? Let me still look at the positive. What is it that still remains between us? What is really our situation, you know? And he spent some time to calculate. You know, you look at the good and the bad. You want to evaluate to say, you know, a person isn't all bad. They always say there's a little good in the worst of us and a little bad in the best of us. So, you know, even though there was a breakdown up in three and stuff, but in four, the assessment of the state of the relationship is what gives hope to it, some glimmer of hope.
Look at
Looking
that.
at all that which
Look at
transpired,
the minute you said it, it popped up in the comments. Give Marvel from Tasmania.
yes,
You see it? Yep.
yes, yes. That's what I got from it. That looking at all that had transpired from the days when you used to be laughing and having fun, and then what really led to us now walking on pins and needles around each other.
All right, let's pause here for a second. Let's pause here for a second and look at mental state. I had about two or so guests on the show. One was talking about mental well-being, mental wellness. I had another guest on the show that was talking about just realizing your full potential and not being afraid to step out of your shell. Now, for the people that we're talking about here, and let me do this real quick. For the people that we're talking about here, um, in order for any of these decisions, in order for you out there to make any decision that is and to be certain that you're making the right decision, you have to be in the right headspace first of all. You see what I'm saying? And initially we talked about somebody that was going through some kind of emotional turmoil, emotional upheaval. Now, I'm going to tell you, it's not the best state of mind to make life-changing decisions in. You have to in that, amidst that, find a moment of calm to realize that to put yourself in a state of mind where you can actually make a decision. You see what I'm saying? So when you find yourself in that situation, just like they had mentioned earlier, and the poem says it, it says, frustration expressed with a pen, the absence of peace, the absence of zen. You're in a state where you're not writing in your head. You're not operating at full mental capacity. You're distorted, you're altered. You have to find a place where you can get back to some kind of normalcy, some kind of certainty. Hold on to something that you're sure about before you make this life changing decision. You see what I'm saying? Because what you don't want to do is, from an emotional place, from a place where your head not so right, from a place where your head not so good, is make a decision that's going to affect you long term, because really and truly it may or may not be the wrong decision, especially if you're altered when you're making it. Let's see what else Miss Moore said.
We're no longer having fun, but is this the way we really want to live? Um, this should be the person I'm able to run for comfort and peace. But instead, I trying to, lock myself away and go express myself with my pen to achieve peace within my soul. So this kind of evaluation, he wants to know, look at why I'm unhappy, why this relationship is so toxic. But that's that glimmer of hope. The fact that he stays to evaluate and he stays to look to see, well, there must be something. And I also saw that in 5, where it says diffusing the unspoken needs. I felt like if this person really wanted this relationship to be over with and done, he wouldn't even try to deduce anybody's need. And then the thing is, he said, not of the giver. So he's not concerned so much for himself,
Right.
but the one who's going to receive. So I thought, well, this person is not so bad after all. He's kind of selfless. Even though you walk around on pins and needles, you want to know that.
What
Okay,
can I do?
I
What
got
can
that.
I do to make a difference? How can I aid the process going
Yes,
forward?
yes. Moving forward, I'm going to try my very best to see so that I don't offend them. If somebody gets offended easily. Um, but this is not somebody who said, well, I finished, I couldn't care less about their feelings. I doing my own thing, you're doing your own thing. You go east and I go west. If you want vex, you vex. If you want to be happy, you happy. That's no business. No, but here's somebody saying, I'm trying to find out what your needs are. And I'm trying to do what you would need and not even put myself so much. I just want to make sure you look it. And
Mhm.
that's that.
All right, let's take another pin there too. We're talking about restoration. We're talking about coming from a place where something is no longer working, and how do you get to that next level where you get things up and running again. And I will say this: what Patricia said is that, hey, in order for that to work, in order for that to work at all, you have to be willing as well to put in some work. You have to be able to identify what it is that you are not doing right, and be willing to make changes within yourself if you are to move forward. It can't just be that person wrong, that person wrong, this person wrong. You have to be able to look within yourself and see what it is that you are doing that is not right, especially in a relationship. I told a friend of mine the other day, I hope he's still watching. I said, my youth, you and this person a long time. And this is foolishness. Let me back up in case. No, everybody should be English, should be patois speaking, more or less. I hope. I said, my youth, if you don't realize you're this damsel a long time, or the long, long, long time. So if this is foolishness how you talk about it now, I know nothing for you rock the boat over. You owe her apology, you owe her dinner, you owe her something nice for her birthday and all these things. You need to check yourself and get back on the road again, because, and I get it, when you're in your feelings, you're not the best person to give anybody advice. But at the same time, you have to be mature enough to be able to identify when you're wrong, and when an apology is what is needed from you, and when you doing something that you might not want to do or readily want to do is the right thing to do. and be mature enough to do it so that you can move forward. Right? Right. All right. So if you joined later on, thank you so much for joining the Even People Show. Today we're exploring the magic of poetry. We're looking at it through the lens of one particular poem called Transition, which four different individuals came on the show and explored. We had Amina Moses Gordon, we had Norman Grant Jr., we had Patrice Moore, and we had Calvin Harris. So far, we've looked at them reading the poem. We looked at why they chose the poem. We looked at the two ladies' opinions as to the hope that they had for the future. Now, what we're going to look at next is the role that transition plays, the role that transition plays in relationship, the role that transition plays in life. We're going to look at Amina Moses Gordon, we're going to look at Patrice, and we're going to look at Calvin Harris and hear what they had to say about this. Let's get to it.
What roles does transition play, or what role does transitioning play in the success of a relationship? Or can you just kind of hit the cruise control button and everything just kind of fall into place?
You know, leave nothing to fall into my place. Listen, you have to be aware. And let me tell you something. Change, this is what I think change is. Change should be enhancing something that's already there. Like you see some potential, right? It's already there. To change somebody who from left to right, that's complete 180, and it's a 180, not 360. I read I'm a math person, so I have to be mathematically correct. If you go 360, you go back in the same place. So everybody out there is in the narrative. But 180, some people you just can't, and some people are a wise person once said that you can't throw a white ball at a black bird and expect the bird to be white.
Good one, Kiko.
So
The bird is going to shake off the powder and it's going to be a black bird to me, right?
Exactly. So you cannot, there are times when transition changes, but enhancing what is already there is good. But for you to change, and what's something that we need to be aware of is to be able to check it. Because sometimes we go into a relationship or enter a relationship, whether it be personal one, family, or whatever, even family sometimes, friends, close friends. You have to be able to deal with the change. And sometimes if the change isn't, taking you to a place of growth and betterment, if you feel uncomfortable in any way, you have to check in with yourself.
Okay,
It's
now
very important to check in with yourself.
let's look at this now. This is the
Now, like Amina said, there's no cruise control, man. There's no cruise. Amina is 20 years married. And she said later on in the show that there is no cruise control. There's no cruising altitude that you get to where you can take off your seatbelt and walk about the cabin, right? When you're in a relationship with somebody else that have feelings and all these things, it's a constant situation. It's a constant thing that needs. It's like having a little baby. You know what I mean? Them need feed, them need change, them need all these things. You have it's like something that you have to constantly be invested in. Like she pointed out, there is no cruising altitude when it comes to this. There's always transition. Later on in the show, she mentioned herself and her husband of 20 years that they're still working things out. Working things out with the person that you're with is not a point that you arrive at. And yes, we're here, cruising altitude, bliss. Let's spread our wings. Let's take our seatbelt off and let's just chill. That's not a thing in real life. It's a constant thing. It's a always thing. You're dealing with people, feelings and emotions and mood, and it's like it could be simple. Let me get in back here. It could be very very simple. You know the saying that they say you should not go grocery shopping when you're hungry because you're gonna buy all kind of things you don't need because you're in an emotional state. A simple thing like hunger, people, is an emotional state, and you have to be cognizant of who you are enough to know when you are altered, to know when your emotions and your feelings are being affected by something, and be able to actually project what is necessary as opposed to just reacting to what it is that you're feeling. So they say Bob Marley say a hungry man is a hungry man. A hungry man is a hungry man. A hungry man should not go grocery shopping, climb out, buy a bunch of things we don't want because he's hungry. It is an emotional state. What we're saying is, when you're in a relationship that has to deal with somebody else, you have to be aware of these emotional state and not respond emotionally to things that does not require an emotional response. And in so doing, make a simple situation an exaggerated situation, or make a bad situation worse. You have to always be aware. Question, please. Is admitting you are wrong the same as accepting that you are wrong? Asking for asking for a friend. Admitting that you are wrong usually is enough. You don't have to accept that you're wrong. Well, I don't know, Brad. I think those are the same thing. If you're admitting that you're wrong, you are accepting that you're wrong. I think those are the same things. And if you're in a situation where you have that here to split, because you are in fact splitting a here there. If you're in that situation where you are in fact splitting a here, then you are wrong. You think you're wrong. You are admitting that you're wrong. Whether you accept it or not is something that you still gonna have to work with, because here's the thing. It might just be you holding on to something that you need to let go of because you felt like it shouldn't have gone down the way it went down. But at the same time, is it a big enough thing for you to make a big deal out of it? Or can you help the other person in the equation come closer to where you are by having a conversation with them? And like we said, don't have the conversation when you're upset. Don't have the conversation when you're hungry. Don't have the conversation when you're in your feelings. Wait till you get to a point of some kind of normalcy before you have the conversation with that person, so that you can actually express what you truly feel, as opposed to express yourself in emotional state being emotional, right? All right, that was what Miss Gordon had to say about the role that transition has to play. Let's see who else had something to say about that.
Transition, right? It's a relationship transitioning from one place to the next. What role does transitioning play in relationships in general, or can you just reach the cruising altitude, hit the autopilot, and the plane just continue flying?
Boy, I wish it were the autopilot one, I wish it was the latter. But transitioning plays a pivotal role for relationships generally towards maturity and development.
Okay.
Not just maturity in the relationship itself, but the issues you go to help to develop personal character building. It's a tool for character building for the persons involved in the relationship.
Mhm.
And to build endurance in the relationship. A good relationship takes commitment and hard work.
So I keep hearing.
Yes, and usually, and usually a long lasting relationship is one that has been tested, tried, and withstood the test of time. So the test have to come to prove if this relationship is really worth it. So, and transitions could also mean that, boy, this really ain't working and I have to make a transition onto another one.
To the next thing. Yeah.
On to the next best thing. So, but transition is very important. It speaks to progress and moving on towards making change in one's life. And I just love this poem. I just love this poem. There are a few of them that I loved, but transition, like I said, was totally relatable for me.
All right, Pat, that's sure that.
But if you look inside,
Let's hear from Mr. Harris.
What it is. Now, transitioning, changing, evolving is becoming increasingly important in our society, as you rightly pointed out. In your capacity as a pastor, principal, guidance counselor, neighborhood watch president, how would you say people are dealing with these transitions that are happening?
I think persons are, depending on what it is that they're transitioning into, but I think on the road you can get the feel that persons are, quite a number of persons are in a state of apathy. There are persons who are not sure of what's going to happen next. There are persons who are um, confused. You know, that type of thing. With all that is happening around us. You know, I was talking to someone the other day, an elderly person. We were talking about elderly in particular. An elderly who has a passbook to go to the bank to check up on their money every month, or to see them write and stamp it and count their zeros in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
You now have to go online to do that. Not all of them are capable of doing that. Not all of them are opening themselves to do that. And for them, they're thinking, what is this system trying to do? Is it trying to rob us? Is it trying to take away what we have? You have another set of persons that I think about our teachers who do that dynamic job of transitioning or from just this from face to face to a virtual community or a virtual space, a virtual learning space, and so on. They are initially they were a little bit of resistance, and I probably for want of a better word, but now they are now more open and more eager. And I'm speaking about myself, more eager about this transition into this virtual space. So, my theme and school is on route to a digitized learning community, and it's going down 21st century learner, and so persons are now making that.
All right, now Mr. Harris here was talking about the need transition or the need for educators really to put themselves in a mindset of transitioning, to put themselves in a mindset to realize that, hey, boys and girls, the classroom is over, or the classroom as we know it is over. We have evolved. We are in a new state of being. This is a different type situation. And if you don't catch up, you're going to get left behind. So you have to transition into what is now the new reality. The next thing we're going to look at, and boy, this show ran longer than I thought it was going to run, mate. But I appreciate y'all for sticking with me because I put a lot of work into this show, mate. This is why I do live shows. I don't have time to edit videos. Who has time to edit videos? Oh my God, I felt like I spent all day editing videos. Anyways, let me hold my Zen back on here. We're going to talk about real quickly who transition would be recommended for a poem like this. Who does it speak to? And who stands again from reading it? We're going to hear from Mr. Grant, who we haven't heard from in a while, and see what he has to say on the matter.
I agree. Now, Laura, why would you recommend transition as a poem to read?
I think it's something that men should do. All men should read, but especially a man who's going through that a turmoil, even in a relationship, or it could be just taking stock of where they are in their personal life or their business, their career. To stop and look at how is this affecting me, how is it impacting me, because as much as we think that when we bottle things in, it's just affecting me, it is really not true. It is really stealing everything that you do around you. If I'm not in a happy place, I am not the same manager at work that when I'm happy. You don't manage the same way, and you resolve things from a completely different standpoint. Instead of looking through the lens of clarity and unobscuredness, you're looking through the lens of anger, or through disappointment, or through disgust. And the way you channel that to the people around you will be in the manner that you're feeling. And in a kitchen where you cook, if you're cooking, if you're not in that Zen zone, the people taste it in the.
I know. If I cook and I'm not feeling it, I can't cook. I cook at my house, and if I'm not feeling it, or if something's going on, don't ask me to cook. I'm not right.
No, it's not the same. It's crazy because it sounds weird, but it is what you feel. Your food
Right.
is what you feel.
I agree.
And for a teacher or a manager, it is the way you manage. Whatever you're feeling, going through it is going to be expressed in the same through those lens or
Right.
through those filters. And it will come across as being brash or harsh. You can lose good workers that way, or you could throw someone over the edge that way.
Or the
And so,
consistency for your food will become an issue because your food is not consistent from day to day.
and people talk about it. It's not the
Absolutely.
same thing. People has the same meal, the same meal, normally it's something is different, and they taste it.
Right. Now,
Yeah, Mr. Grant was saying, hey, you gotta transition is necessary, but at the same time, you have to make sure that your headspace right. If nothing else, you got to make sure that your headspace right. Because for him as a chef, he's saying once you get into that place where your equilibrium is off, in his instance, it can tell in the food that you're preparing for people. For us, it can tell. It's so funny. My daughter have like, I don't know what that is. Not a thermometer, it's not a barometer, it's not, I don't know, some iter, but she has it for me. What I'm feeling, you know what I mean, at any given point. If I pick her up and as she sit down in her car, she said, Daddy, you all right? Daddy, you all right? Are you sure? It's almost like she's connected to me, and the minute she come in, she absorbs, she absorbs what I'm feeling. And if I'm in a bad mood, it's almost like she can tell instantaneously that I'm in a bad mood. And we're saying that transition can be recommended for just about for, Norman recommended it for males, so that they are aware that, hey, when you are going through something, you need to take the appropriate actions to get yourself back right again. Because when you're not right, I mean, nobody wins. Your food, even if you're a chef and you're cooking, your food and your customers don't even win because you're not going to prepare your food right. Let's hear
who
what
do you
Mr. Harris
recommend this
says.
one for?
Well, just about anyone. I recommend those persons within the education system. I recommend it to persons who probably going through frustration. For me, it's a point that if it is that you read it, there's, well, I think you say, as we just said a while ago, that there are several interpretations to it and so on. Within this context, though, it's applicable for just about anyone at this time. Once a person is interested in poetry,
Mhm.
and is willing to look at it and see what it means to them.
Right.
That's my take on it.
Now,
It
the
is a very
narrator,
good point, though. Very, very good point.
appreciate,
And
appreciate you,
the
sir.
way that it is simple. It is
Yes,
simple, but it's very, very complex.
and for those who don't have, there's a bunch of those in the book.
All right. Like I said, Mr. Harris jumped in and he was saying, yeah, anybody can really get a vibe off this. Kiko, on another note, Miss Gordon, you get the doctorate, you get the doctorate already, and the doctorate that already, tell me, Kiko, if you get the doctorate, if you talk to it. Because I never have no actual full doctor on the show yet. I've had about 3 or 4 doctoral candidates. So if you got the doctorate already, mate, you gotta let me know so I can be back on the show with it. All right. So what we're gonna talk about next, real quick. Then boss you, okay, look at this. Apparently, Miss Gordon, who was a doctoral candidate when she was on the show, is now a doctor. Congratulations, my dear. Congratulations. Anne Marie Easington, thank you so much for checking in. Anne Marie Easington, Amina, myself, we had a bunch of group work together in college. You're very welcome, my dear. We had a bunch of group work together in college. But what I want us to look at real quick before we jump off this show here, I want us to look at real world applications of the poem transition. Like we looked at it from several angles. We're going to look at some real world applications. Um, just what affects just about anybody. All right. So we're going to hear from the Reverend himself on this one here.
What the lines that spoke to you specifically? Are there any lines or concepts that you think are applicable or relevant to the wider society or the people in general from this poem transition?
Yes, quite a few of them. The frustration expressed, the absence of peace, the absence of calm, the first two lines that are there, insecurity in one state of mind, question the motives of the other side, even in this context. COVID, persons are frustrated, persons are not sure of what, let me use, for example, the vaccine. Persons are, the whole idea, the advent of COVID itself is a big question. And even to this point, persons are not willing, they're questioning whether or not they should take the vaccine. So persons are in a state of apathy. Persons have lost their jobs due to the fact that they're downsizing and there's no work for them. So there's a state of frustration and confusion. There's a lack of peace among persons right across the board. They're not just right across the board. And so on. So, and sometimes persons question the motive of the government, question the motive of the messages, and some even question the motive of God.
True.
Why has God allowed this to happen? So we do that sometimes. We ask the question, why is this happening? When will this change? And so on. The sadness that persists, the absence of laughter, the absence of the silence that permeates, nothing is said in this dormant state. So those are very resonating. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this one. Because it really speaks to what is happening currently right across the world.
No, it's so funny you say that. You just said that it speaks so specifically to what is going on currently. What is the date that poem was written?
Where's the date?
Is it on? It's not there?
Yeah,
Okay, I have it on mine. That poem was written March 28th, 2014.
So it's a futuristic poem, is it?
It is something. It is something.
So we can jump if you have still another day, come to the bigger topic.
You understand?
That's what I was told. You can predict
Wait.
one more day. When I read the poem, I see what is happening as it relates to COVID and the challenges. Even in the classroom, the transition. Teachers at a wrong time transitioning when they have to go on the online space and all the training and all that they have to go through. The frustration that met them, the family challenges that they have.
Well, look at the next stanza, Calvin. Stanza 3, where it says the ever fleeting clarity.
What is the reality now? Because there's no, first people not go back to the same. This is normal, So things will never go back to the normal that we know. This is the new normal. So until you find this reality in which, in recent times they have closed social banking without and going through cashless.
Right.
Or when the future is cashless. Already active for that. It is a reality that is coming. And people are need clarity.
Right.
And
the next line too, the next two lines as well.
And look at
One more day, but it is
I need to get in my church, right? Showers, one more inch and the flood devours. And they're coming fast and furious. So technology, you have disease, you have viruses, all of those things, lots of jobs, everything. Just one more shower.
Yes. One more drip. What is it? A couple more drops, and the dam go break.
Yes.
Couple more drops, a couple more drops, and the dam is gonna break. Yeah, Rev, like I said, Rev was the last person. Rev was the fourth person that had done that particular poem, and he took it in a direction that I never even thought possible. You know what I mean? I never saw the poem in that light. But when Calvin came on, he really took it in a different direction. So there's a couple of things I want us to do really quick before we leave. I asked Calvin, how he felt about being the fourth reader that was on the show, and this is what he had to
I'll make a
say.
confession. What if I told you? What if I told you that you are the fourth person to come on this show and do this poem,
Ah,
and nobody has the same interpretation of the poem?
yeah, I know. Yeah.
You are. What if I tell you you know of the other three? What if I told you the other three were Amina Mosley Gordon,
Oh, yes, never be friends.
vice
Yeah,
principal in New York,
yes.
um, Norman Grant,
Oh, yes, Norman.
top chef at his university,
Yes.
um, Patrice Moore,
Mm-hmm.
singer,
Yeah.
songwriter, artist, musician,
Yes.
and none of them had the same interpretation of the poem. And today, when you said you wanted to do transition, initially I was gonna say to you, transition has been done several times on the show. You sure? Are you sure you don't want to pick something else? And I said, you know what? Let me look at it. And last, I looked over the previous shows last night, and I'm like, you know what? I think there's another direction we could go with this all together. And hearing you out the gate right now, taking it into a fifth dimension or a sixth dimension from where it went before, it's a totally different show, a totally different interpretation, totally different analysis and analogies that you're giving now of the same poem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah,
is
yeah,
inspiring.
yeah. It speaks a lot about the right now. All that.
Well, you see, but here's the thing though. One more day, and I probably could achieve real
Yeah,
great things
yeah.
here.
I don't know what happened.
One more day,
Yeah,
boy.
you heard that, folks. One more day, boy. One more day that could have been something special. But yeah, Calvin came on, like I said, as the fourth person to have come on and done the show. And he really took it in an entirely different direction than I thought the poem was even capable of going in. But like I said, the show we're having tonight really is entitled "The Magic of Poetry," and that is exactly what we're exploring. We're exploring the magic of poetry. We're exploring how different people see poetry in an entire different light. Now, there's about two more points I want us to jump in here that I felt were valid points before we left. One of them was a point that I made myself while on
So
Pat's
you did
show. Let's
say
see
that
that.
sometimes the transition is the transition that is necessary is to go to the next thing. I think if I speak on this, I would say if I were to take something from this for me personally, or to put out there to folks, it would be mirror the approach, mirror the approach, so that you can arrive at the right conclusion. So
Right.
don't just do it with the hot head. Don't just do it when everything is wrong and you're in your emotions or in your feelings per se. Take the time, and if you need to put it on the pen, assess it.
Yeah.
All the lines that you pointed out that deals with that shows composure and shows reservation, and go through all those things to get yourself at the best decision for the situation. And if that decision is walking away, walk away. If that decision,
Yes.
all right, if that decision is now, stay and work, then stay and work. But if
Yes.
you put through the process, it's like an experiment, like you do experiment in chemistry, physics. As long as you duplicate the process, you should get the result at the end. You know what I mean? But
Right.
if you and it don't test positive, then it's not positive. If you test it and it's positive, then it's positive. But as long as you make sure
Right.
the process that you use to get there is in fact the right process that should be used, then
Right.
wherever the book stops, that's where you go.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right,
Exactly.
Patrice. Before I let you go, my dear, any last words for the
All right, it says wherever the buck stops, that's where the buck stops. It says what you really want to do is, like I mentioned before, is be in the correct headspace to be able to make the necessary decisions that you have to make. And wherever that decision takes you, that's where that decision takes you. Because if I'm to be honest, back in the day, people used to tell people, Yo, you have to stick it out. You get with somebody, you have to stick it out, and no matter what happens, you have it. And I'm not trying to go against what I've been taught, mate. Am I? No, I'm not really in it. But yo, if you're not working out, work, dog. Like you sitting there, I'm trying to play nice in a situation that is just not for you. It's just not for you. Lego, you need for Lego, you need to get up and move out. You understand? Because guess what? We are all awesome people. Some of us might achieve more, some of us might have more. We are all awesome people. You're an awesome person. Everybody out there is an awesome person. And you taking foolishness from anybody at all is not something that should be accepted or welcomed or something that you should stand for. So when you see it, if you approach it the rational, logical way and you're not getting the reciprocity that you're supposed to get, man, Lego, yeah, man, I don't make nobody tell you nothing. I can translate that for those who didn't get it. Just let me know. Leave a comment if you want me to translate that for you, mate. In it. Okay. There's two more things I want to jump on. And I know the show ran a little longer than I thought, and I apologize, man. I didn't expect these things to run so long. And I took a long time to produce the show, by the way. I'm not doing any more shows like this ever. You're welcome for this one. Thank you for staying tuned because I'm not doing any more in it. All right. So there's another thing I wanted to look at. When we were in there, Norman Grant made some points toward the end of his show that I want to share with you. Like I said, we are talking about the magic of poetry. We are talking about different interpretations of poetry. We are talking about different interpretations of the same set of written words by different individuals. Norman Grant is the one I want to look at here. This is what
But when
he
we're wrapping up here in
had
a
to
minute,
say.
Carrie Ann Booth says, people are some total of their biological makeup and socialization. These two create the basis of how we live and interact. She sounds smarty. Jeez, you man. Got my phone in. She can speak OPE here. But I agree, Kerry. But now let me let you address her first. What are your thoughts on Kerry's comment?
No, it's a fact. We're a combination of both. Um, I still believe what you said earlier. To a certain extent, that is a good excuse for us. But at some point in time, we've got to make a conscious decision to say, that's not what I want.
What kind of man do I want to be? What kind of woman do I want to be?
Right. We've got to make that decision. And not just think of, well, what if women didn't make conscious decision that we are going to steer our girls differently? We're not going to be housewives and stuff. That was a conscious decision made by a population, by a generation.
A generation of women, yes.
Yeah, by a generation, and we're seeing the fruits of it right now, right? So it's going to take a generation of men to say, I'm not going to let my boy become marginalized by social norms.
Right.
I'm channeling him in a particular direction to make him achieve his full potentials.
Right.
And while doing so, expressing himself the best way he can without fear of backlash.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. It is going to take a concerted effort, and I think the reason why even our society or diaspora is affected the way it is, it's just because it has a lot to do with how we came about, how we came to be, what relationship, what family was during, say, for example, slavery, what family was after slavery. Because even, I don't know you, I'm going to say something I've never even thought of before. You had men during slavery that were used as breeders. They were big strong men. They would be used to breed as many women as they can for stronger slaves for the next generation. Now, when slavery ended, what does this man do? He have 55 children out there. Who is now his family? Are any of these people family? Or is he just, he's essentially at this point just the sperm donor that provided what was necessary to bring more slaves about. You know what I mean? And these are things that I think, like you said, it's going to take a generation of men that decided, you know what? We are going to change this. like when we went to Michael, and I believe that while we were at Michael, we changed the dress code.
Yeah.
While we were there, we went there and we were like, you know what? We're going to change up this whole dress code situation. And the whole dress code of the college changed before we left. I think it's going to take something like that where men across racial barriers, across cultural barriers, across geographical barriers get together and say, you know what? Um, we're going to have to do something different if we don't want our sons and daughters to have to go through what we went.
That is true. That is so true.
All right, Mr. Grant, we are just about.
All right, like we said just now, we say if we don't want the same thing for our children, if we don't want our young men to feel like rough and gruff and tough is the only way to be and the way to interact with the world in general, we're going to have to make a decision. We are fathers. I'm 40 enough years old now. Well, 40 a little bit, if I'm to be honest. And we have children. We're the ones now with children. Everybody that is on here that checked in today has children, more or less. You know what I mean? Whether you gave birth to them yourself or you're responsible for raising them, or you're responsible for impacting who they are as individuals, we have to make a conscious effort into who do we mold these little people to become? What are the information that we're imparting on them? What is the knowledge that we're imparting on them? Are we just regurgitating the same things we were taught that is going to have them, that is going to make them have the same stereotypes and limitations that we had because of the people that taught us? Or are we going to evolve the thought process so that the evolution can affect them and they can take this thing to a whole nother level? You know what I mean? Like I said, the poem is transition. Today we're exploring the topic, um, the magic of poetry. We're looking at just the way poetry affects different people. I really actually have two more things that I had on the agenda to do. I'm going to try to do them real quickly if you bear with me. And it's just bear with me. All right, we got two more things and then we're out. All right, check this.
Michael, Martin, is the church community, you know, where it is that church is now is online. Persons who have dreamt that you would have reached the stage where you don't have to be in church, and then all the churches would have been involved in the process of streaming live, so on. The person still, do people still believe that this is and the question is still asked, is this a devilish move? Because people can't go in church anymore.
Right.
Physical church.
Right. Is the vaccine the mark of the beast? And all these things.
Is the mark of the beast. But is it not an opportunity for the church to open, and it doesn't mean the physical doors and the windows, but physically open it virtually so that more people can be reached. Send a simple link and entire household.
Enough church funeral, anything. Somebody will give you a link. And look at us now. Look at us now. You're in Ohio, I'm in Orlando, and here we are.
And to be honest with you, prior to maybe last year or maybe the ending of the last year, I probably didn't even know that this would have happened. Because we were not so up to speed with this kind of thing. Kind of just propelled us.
Yeah, the learning curve kind of.
Ask the question, is the devil's ploy for church doors to be closed? Is it? Is the question to ask. Person still ask that question. But church is still going on.
All right, so Sir Calvin.
The man said, "Is it the devil's ploy for church doors to be closed?" But this is our new reality. This is what the world has become, for better or for worse. They once upon a time, maybe years from now, if we don't end, you're gonna have a storybook that starts of once upon a time, in a land far away, there was a virus called COVID. It came out and it affected the elderly and people with respiratory disorders and underlying conditions. It did not affect young children too much. Babies were pretty much immune. etc., etc., the end, right? But whatever that looks like, you know, and it's just going to be what that looks like. All right. I have one very, very last thing, and it is actually the closing remarks, the last words, the last comments by Mr. Calvin Harris. I like what he had to say, and I'm gonna share that with you now, and then we're gonna wrap this ball game up. If my thing that I'm trying to play plays forever, let's go.
Out Calvin Harris before I let you go.
I think if I'm going to be sharing, and I probably still speak on the merits of the poem and use it to kind of build base foundation of child Jesus to always know when to make a transition. You cannot. I use the term stasis, inner stasis, for a long time.
Mhm.
It makes you become miserable. And I want to say this to the Martin. If you're at a place for certain period of time, you realize that you start to get miserable. You probably need to check your watch to see whether it's time for you to transition.
A true one.
And if it is that you're at a place where you have become too comfortable, you need to check your watch also.
Mhm.
Because it is time to transition. You need a new challenge.
Yes.
And I use that in the background of at the time when the Israelites were well all right on the mountain and they were eating food and everything.
Everything
And
else.
God told Moses to tell them, listen, time to pack up.
Back up.
Get this
Road
get out.
road time now.
This is not the promised land. You were just
Mhm.
for a while.
Mhm.
So, for me, you have to know when is your time. And some persons are locked in because at the time when they should have transitioned, they were afraid to, and they become so miserable and frustrated with the system or where they are. And I'm just talking about general across the board. You have to know when it's your time. It's your time to move on. It's your time to take on a new project. It's your time to take on a new challenge. It's the time to get a new circle of people. Do you know that there are times when you have to broaden your scope to have other persons around you so that you can, you know, have more experience, reach your zenith or your fullest potential.
Yes.
And sometimes you are at a practical stage, these people are for such a time. But there comes a time when you have to move on, not to forget those persons, but you have to be in a bigger circle, Martin.
Yes.
So that your fullest potential, your self-actualization can be realized.
Mhm.
It's like rubbing shoulder with those who are seeing the vision
Right.
that you are seeing. And
Yo, I'm gonna stop right there. I want to stop right there. Calvin Harris says you have to be able to identify when it's time to move, when it's time to change your circle, when it's time to change the people around you, when it's time to change your perspective, when it's simply time for the next thing. You can't just sit in the same place, stagnant, not moving. The poem is called Transition. We were talking about the magic of poetry. We were talking about this poem in particular called Transition. We were talking about the necessity of transition. We spoke about why you need to transition. We spoke about the hope that there is when you transition. We talk about the role that transition plays in life in general. We spoke about real world applications of transitioning. And Calvin was just there just now, closing you off with letting you know that, hey, this is necessary. You have to be able to identify when even the very people around you, the phone call that you make every day, the people you text and call every day, when they are no longer consistent with where you are trying to go, when it is time to change them. And it's not that you're saying that they're bad people. It's not that you don't like them. It's not like you think, say, you're bougie or you're nice or you're uptown or you arrive. No. You're just realizing that my goals, my aspirations, where I want to be is no longer consistent with these individuals. And if I stay around them, I'm never going to reach where I want to reach. You have to, I have a friend of mine that she likes to say, you have to stretch yourself. You have to stretch yourself sometimes. Sometimes the transitions requires you to stretch yourself. So if you're in a position right now and you're wondering, could I, should I, what will happen if I do it? Because guess what? You know already what will happen if you don't, but you don't know what will happen if you will. So rather than sit there and wait and cross with your fingers crossed and hope, no. Step out and go up and do something different. Step out, stretch yourself, elevate yourself, take on a challenge, take on a promotion, take on a new role, do something different that is going to get you in a different place. And see where that takes you. See where you land. But all we ask, which is what we mentioned before, is that make sure that you are in the right headspace when you make that decision. Make sure that you're not coming from a headspace that is altered. Make sure you're not in a head state where you're emotionally charged to where you cannot make that decision. Get yourself at that place, that level, that zen. And if when you evaluate the pros and the cons, if when you evaluate the do's and the don'ts, if when you evaluate what is best for me and mine, you realize that upping and moving is what is necessary. Oh boy, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but think about Moses, man. The man couldn't even speak very well. The man get a charge to lead the whole of the people of Israel go to the promised land. The man be like, what? Aaron say, yo, dog, no worry. Everything will go Chris. Me there with you, come in. The man say, move, make quick move. The man reach at the Red Sea and say, seated on me, no, say me shouldn't left. The father said to him, say, no, wash your face, dog. Go, sir. And the sea go part. And things happen that he never thought that could have happened. But even on a less miraculous or wondrous scale, there are little things that we can do that can change our situation, that can change our reality. My boy said it's all an experiment. You will and can never know where the next move is going to take you. However, we just need to be open-minded to other opportunities. Be open-minded to other opportunities. And sometimes that's the right move. You just want to get yourself in the right headspace to be able to determine whether or not that is the right move. And if in fact that is the right move, guess what you need to do? You need to make that move. Ladies and gentlemen, this was the Evening People Show. I certainly appreciate y'all for staying with me. This was a long show, man. I didn't expect the show to run so long. I did, however, take all bloody day preparing it. And here we are in it. Thank you for staying tuned. Thank you for joining in. If you don't have a copy of the book, check it out. If you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, The Martin Matthews Project, subscribe to that too, because anytime the Evening People go live, we positive. We have vibes. We have something to say to somebody that if they're in a bad way, we're going to straighten them out. Nah, I mean, time to go. Nah, I mean, nah, I mean, peace.